In this self-knit bobbly da baba dee ba doo doo. Greetings, listeners all around the world. You're listening to the Uniquilibrium podcast by Hypno-Athletics, exercising your mind. I'm your host and guide, Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander, and I'll be talking about all things metaphysical, hypnosis, and meditation for relaxation, sleep, lucid dreaming, and beyond. Get ready. Here we go. All right, we're definitely in the beyond. For a while, I've been on this thing about the extraterrestrials and fighting back against them. This is no different. This is maybe going to be called something like technological considerations for eliminating the extraterrestrial threat. Yes, I know that's a mouthful. So, technological considerations, meaning what technology do we need to think about to eliminate the extraterrestrial threat, right? And that's what this is. That's what it's going to be. Technological considerations for eliminating the extraterrestrial threat. I've already built a weapon called the Metatron weapon for attacking alien threats, and so you can go back and look on those. I'll put a link into the blog page for this podcast on uniquilibrium.com. But now we're going to go into a little bit of what technology we can consider, why it may or may not be viable, and how we can use it against the extraterrestrial threat. Now, to be clear, I do agree with many people that not all extraterrestrials are bad. And it's not also this idea that there's just good aliens and bad aliens. There's everything in between. However, the main ones that I've noticed, for the most part, because I've had an extraordinary life, and things that have happened with me and that continue to happen with me would be considered blessings. And I've been very fortunate in a lot of things up to this very day. There's only been one major exception in my life that has been very upsetting to me, but it's the worst thing that I've ever experienced, and I'm unfazed by anything else. And I may get into that another time. This, however, is about the technological consideration for eliminating the extraterrestrial threat and understanding that there is an extraterrestrial threat, or rather I should say there's an alien threat. The word alien is usually used for something that's unknown or unfamiliar but is also bad. At least in the United States, the term illegal alien is used to separate people, the us versus them kind of mentality, and so I'm using it in the same way. Whereas extraterrestrials would be a more blanket term for beings or consciousness or entities that are not of this earth or from another terra, another territory, another planet. That's what the very word terrestrial means. So they're extraterrestrial. And then maybe extraterrestrial intelligence would be used for the beneficial, positive extraterrestrials. Well, I don't know. How about I just stick with religious terms like angels and demons? Because these gray aliens seem to act like demons a lot to a lot of people and do some very crappy demonic-like things. Anyway, the ones that are coming here to Earth and interfering with people like myself and causing very unpleasant and definitely unwanted experiences need to be fought back against. And that's why I created the weapon called the Metatron weapon against alien threats. And again, on unequilibrium.com you can access how to build and use the weapon, and there will be future podcasts where I specifically focus on just that, and do even a guided meditation specifically focused with a Demi-Phase audio that I'll create for the very purpose of using the Metatron weapon. For now, I've released 2 audios for that purpose, and today a third one. One is called Demi-Phase 11.1. The other one is called Vesper Dust. And one that I've released already a while ago, you're hearing in the background now with the sounds of rain and birds and everything, some sounds of nature and the frequencies you're hearing. It's called Downpour Phaser, and it's been released a while ago on my Demi-Phase podcast. I have 5 of them because that's just how I am. I have like 15 websites. I'm so scatterbrained that I just throw stuff all over the internet. But one of the podcasts is called Demi-Phase. This one is called Unequilibrium. I have Hypnoathletics. I have Solfeggio and the Seas, which is my most popular one. And I have 613 Records. Anyway, so the Metatron weapon, you can use the Demi-Phase audios to help synchronize both sides of your brain to create coherence in combination with visualizing, meditating, or even viewing Metatron's cube, either in one dimension or... I haven't yet found a video because I haven't looked very much on YouTube for one that you can look at in 3D, but I think that would be awesome to look at for a little while to get what Metatron's cube really looks like as best as an artist can render it in 3 dimensions, while focusing on the gray aliens and the reptilians, or any aliens that you've had experience with, any demons that you've had experience with, and imagining, visualizing, thinking about the destruction, the death, the pain, the elimination of these alien threats, and helping and using the image of Metatron's cube and the sounds of the Demi-Phase audios to help you to focus the energy as a psychic weapon, a metaphysical weapon, the Metatron weapon against these alien threats. So again, I just gave the brief instructions about how to build and use the Metatron weapon. But what about these technological considerations? Well, that was one of them, or a few of them. One technology to use is binaural beats. Popularized very much by the Monroe Institute, founded by Robert Monroe, who had many out-of-body experiences or who would astral project. The Monroe Institute is in Virginia, the state of Virginia in the United States. And the organization, the technology he created is called Hemi-Sync, which is an abbreviation for Hemispheric Synchronization, which I base very heavily my brand technology called Demi-Phase, which are my brand and my specific formulations of binaural beats, which means exactly the same thing as Hemi-Sync, Hemispheric Synchronization. Hemi and the word Demi both mean half, And sync means synchronization, so does the word phase in some uses of the definition. So Demi-Phase is getting the two halves in phase or in synchronization, hemispheric synchronization. And so that's one of the technological considerations in eliminating the extraterrestrial threat, because the extraterrestrials are moving through or appearing from other dimensions or other universes, and if they are coming from other planets, they're using interdimensional portals or another technology, teleportation, even time travel, wormholes. But I'm not going to focus on those type of things because those are things that are theorized in mainstream physics and may not be anywhere close to what is actually happening. The technology that is closer to happening, because I have direct experience with this, is consciousness based. And not consciousness based in a law of attraction type of way, but more consciousness based in a way that is more like, which is also one of the technological considerations, is remote viewing and remote influencing, which are different forms of psychic abilities which are closer to telepathy and telekinesis, which are very valid technological considerations. In fact, and this is not to what gives it credibility, but remote viewing was used by and researched by the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States to locate and view and spy on targets from a distance, a physical distance through space, and also through time as well. And at least one person who worked with the Central Intelligence Agency researched Hemi-Sync for escaping the confines of space-time. And so these are some of the technological considerations for eliminating the alien threat. And also, one reason why I'm mentioning it is not because of just knowing about remote viewing or remote influencing is going to help you to use it. Actually, I gave a very specific way of how to use part of remote viewing and influencing, with focusing on the Metatron weapon, for example, using binaural beats to help to synchronize your brainwave activity to become more coherent, like a laser. To become more coherent is like going from the beam of a flashlight to a laser beam. It becomes more focused and concentrated. And then focusing on the images of the types of creatures that are alien threats, specifically the gray aliens and the reptilians or reptoids. And other people may have had experiences with other ones, but I'm only going to speak about the ones that I've had negative experiences with and the ones that I am attacking with this technology. Now, some more rationale, and the reason also why I'm mentioning these things is because sometimes people need to know, and they want to have some more evidence and to have some more backup of why they should. Some people will not act on things unless they have a lot more evidence, which is understandable. But in this experience, in this field of close encounters, ufology, it's not completely accepted in the mainstream, and so it's very difficult for a lot of people to to accept it. So I have to draw from a lot of different resources to help convince some people to take action in fighting against and eliminating very specific extraterrestrial threats. And so I'm gonna go back and forth from some of the things that are more mainstream and some of the things that are maybe more fringe and not as well known. And Hemi-Sync is well known by a lot of people, but a lot more people use binaural beats and also isochronic tones. For example, like I mentioned before, the one podcast that I released called Solfeggio and the Seas, a lot of people are really into these solfeggio tones, which are very specific musical notes that are reported to have various different kinds of physical, mental, psychological, and spiritual influences on people when they hear them. Just the tones, the pure tones by themselves, without them being manipulated into binaural beats for Demi-Phase or Hemi-Sync. And so a lot of people know about these types of technologies and already consider the technology of sound healing or vibrational healing when considering something like meditation, which could be considered spiritual. And it helps people with the different listening to different sounds, or music helps people with a lot of different things. So that's already established with a lot of people. I mentioned Hemi-Sync and remote viewing in relation to the CIA is because a lot of people consider the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America, to be a credible source. Well, let me rephrase that. A lot of people consider that if the CIA was researching or using something, because they're a highly secretive organization that has a mission in part, we could really just simplify it and say of dominance and control to win, then for them to have looked into something like Hemi-Sync and remote viewing, there must be some power and some weight behind it. Now the fact that the research they've done on remote viewing and Hemi-Sync have been declassified could mean a couple of things. One of the things it could mean is that they've far surpassed that technology and have something way more powerful than that, and it's somewhat obsolete. Or that they found it to not be useful at all. I would agree with that second part, that it may not be useful at all if it were not for the fact that I have found it to be quite useful, Hemi-Sync and remote viewing. And to the other part of them having something far more powerful, that would be more plausible from my understanding, because I do know that Hemi-Sync and remote viewing are workable technologies that have that are successful in achieving certain results. And regarding other things that may be more successful or more powerful, I'm going to touch on some of those things as well. But moving on, going back to something that may or may not be well known to you or a lot of other people, is what's known as the CE5 Initiative, or the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Initiative, founded by Dr. Stephen Greer, in which he has put together a CE5 protocol for consciously contacting and interacting with extraterrestrial intelligences and calling them to certain areas so that people can view their vehicles flying around in the sky and giving them mental suggestions telepathically to have them interact with people, either doing different maneuvers or whatnot, which seems kind of like a parlor trick sometimes, but a lot of people are really into it. There's a lot of CE5 groups all over the world, and I haven't really looked into it that much to know if people are actually having information imparted to them by this, but that's not the point. I'm not scrutinizing it for that. I'm just sharing it because it's something that there's documentation for, and you can look it up for yourself and find out that there are a lot of people who claim, and there's some video evidence and other evidence for these people's claims that they are in fact communicating with and summoning, for lack of better words, these different entities and their vehicles into certain areas where these people are, and these entities and vehicles are allowing themselves to be recorded in photography and in videos. So that just lends a little bit more evidence that there's a consciousness aspect that we should be considering in our technological considerations for eliminating the extraterrestrial threat. And maybe even considering calling allies if there are, in fact, angels. We can help them, and angels being the good aliens, right? The extraterrestrial intelligences. If there are in fact aliens, maybe we can call them in for assistance to to fight against demons. Aren't that what isn't that what angels are supposed to do anyway? To fight demons? Demons meaning the aliens, or the bad aliens, the ones who are abducting people and experimenting on them. So perhaps that's one use, that CE5, and I'm gonna work with that as well. Now, some of the other things to consider, one very interesting thing to consider going forward is to just think about, how does this work? How is it that these different beings that maybe from different galaxies or different planets even are able to travel to our world so quickly? And remember, I mentioned certain things like before I mentioned Hemi-Sync and remote viewing, but there's a consciousness-based technology, and I'm going to get into exactly a hypothesis of how that works, because there has to be a way, like how do you mind control a vehicle to steer it and to move it through space and time? And there's a lot of evidence to how that can work. I'm going to talk about that in just a second here. But to set that up, I want to just briefly talk about a scientist, mathematician named James Clerk Maxwell, who unified electricity and magnetism with 3 equations from other scientists and one of his own that explained the field strength and size of the electrical force and the strength and size of the magnetic force, and unified them into the electromagnetic force. And in his book, A Treatise on Electricity and Magnetism, of which there are 2 volumes, in the end of the first volume, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the books in front of me, I don't have any notes about it, but what I do know from reading the book, at the end, he says that one of the main things he was trying to communicate in that entire treatise was the existence of an ether, meaning that there has to be some kind of medium, a field, in which electricity and magnetism propagate or move through or have their effects through. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about an etheric field, or an ether, but in a slightly different way than James Clerk Maxwell may have thought about it, because his ether was maybe more like a fluid or a field like Albert Einstein's space-time, where gravity warps and bends the space-time. So those are types of fields, but they talk about it more like a fabric and that kind of ether idea from classical mechanics. But what I'm talking about is a bit different, and because it's more mathematically and conceptually based, but I'm not going to throw any mathematical formulas out there at all. I'm going to talk about it in very simple quantities, just basic arithmetic, addition and subtraction. And so one of the technologies that leads me into is called, or the ideas in science and physics is a special field called subquantum kinetics that's been pioneered by Paul A. LaViolette. And I've mentioned before that I'm familiar with one of his books called Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. And his etheric field is filled with these different types of, these quantities of energy called Etherons that, depending on how they interact with each other in this unextended domain, meaning it doesn't exist in space or time, they're simply quantities and energies, vibrations, if you will, like string theory, but actually more coherent and has provided more predictions than string theory or a lot of other fields of physics, where the interactions of these etherons, depending on how they interact, they, for lack of a better word, they pop up, they propagate, they form into our physical reality, into the various different subatomic particles that then have interactions with each other and form the fundamental units of our universe, the atoms and the molecules and everything like that. And this is an ether that he talks about. As a matter of fact, like I said, the quantities, the energies that interact are called etherons. But another thing about Paul A. LaViolette's book, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, is him explaining, coming up with and talking about subquantum kinetics in order to understand electrogravitics and or the manipulation of gravity by electromagnetic means. And for example, many people who report seeing unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomenon, or what people might think are otherworldly vehicles flying around in the sky or going through the water or wherever they view them, as being able to maneuver in these very special ways that are claimed that we don't have objects on, that there's no man-made vehicles that can do that, which there may actually be. But the basic idea is that, according to electrogravitics, based in subquantum kinetics, these vehicles use a gravity manipulating technology that is able to produce an independent gravitational field for the vehicle and its occupants, so that no matter what kind of maneuvers they make, whether they stop suddenly or accelerate suddenly, the occupants that are piloting these vehicles do not feel the inertial forces of gravity on them that would kill them if people were inside these craft moving the way they do without this inertia dampening technology. And it basically works by creating a gravitational field, an independent one, independent of the bodies, the massive bodies around it, like the Earth and the Sun, creating an independent gravitational field. To use the terms well and hill, the gravity that we mostly experience is considered a gravity well, like a hole in the ground that holds water. If you stepped over the entrance of a well, you would fall in due to the force of gravity. You would go down. Or a gravity hill is the opposite of that, whereas imagine if you were standing on the ground and a hill suddenly formed underneath you, it would lift you up. Or if a big lump or something like that came out of a wall behind you, it would push you forward. So the same way this electrogravitics works is if you had in the front of a vehicle, it created a gravity well so that the vehicle was pulled into it, but simultaneously behind the vehicle there was a gravity hill pushing it forward, and then from the front and the back, the hill and the well and the back moving towards the craft, from the back to the front, from the front to the back, the different forces balance out in such a way that it cancels out the inertia in the vehicle so that the occupants don't feel these forces. So when angels, demons, extraterrestrial intelligences, or alien threats appear in vehicles that display these types of movements, it's perhaps a technology similar to that, where they are operating within their own independent gravitational field in order to be able to maneuver. Now, why is this important? Because when they appear in our reality, in our dimension, in our universe, and on our world, they become vulnerable to electrogravitic manipulation. And even researchers who have done work with electrogravitics, have actually created gravity beams that are able to punch holes through concrete and dent very thick pieces of steel. So another technological consideration for knocking these alien, demon vehicles out of our skies and oceans is to use this type of gravity beam technology and aim it at these vehicles, because it's a similar technology. You know, the fighting fire with fire idea. So that's subquantum kinetics and electrogravitics, and how some of these vehicles may be traveling when they enter a physical three-dimensional reality. Now, what provides the boundaries and the parameters to be able to control these vehicles mentally? And I bring that up because there's a lot of speculation that these vehicles are controlled telepathically or controlled mentally with thought. And so here are some ideas, some speculation, some hypotheses of my own of how this might work. Now, there's an organization called the Institute of Noetic Sciences that I believe in part was founded by Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon. And I'm going by memory on this, so don't quote me, look into this yourself, but this is the idea that I have, that Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man, number 6 to walk on the moon, he founded, or was one of the founders of IONS, as it's known, or the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I'm going to restart my backtrack and possibly leave this 34-minute mark for a sponsor break. So let me start that again. Here we go. All right, and I don't know if you noticed, but this is kind of by accident when I created this audio called Downpour Phaser. There are these interesting sounds in the background that when I was manipulating my software, it reminds me of the sound that's made by the creatures from the movie Pitch Black with Vin Diesel. So when we're talking about aliens, I chose this one, but I didn't realize that this was the one that had those sounds because I only did it once in one of my productions. Anyhow, I was going to talk about IONS. the Institute of Noetic Sciences as giving some ideas of how these different vehicles or different technologies may be interfaced, specifically electromagnetic technology or electrogravitic technology, and vehicles and different apparatus that the aliens may be using to control people's minds and do different things. How are they working? How are they controlled mentally? And so the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which, like I said, I think it was entirely or in part founded by Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was number 6 man to walk on the moon. They have done a lot of research into thought-based or mental interfacing with technology. A very simple example of this is, think about a dice. So I'm going to talk about very physical first and then talk about the digital interface. So, if you roll a dice, it has one of 6 numbers that it can land on. And if you want it to land on 1 and you focus and think about it and stare at the die, or if you have 2 dice and you want it to give snake eyes, or you want to give 2 6s, whatever number you want to focus on, and you keep focusing on it, you can cause the dice to fall out of what would happen statistically or probabilistically more in the favor of the result that you want. And I remember something like this happened because I got the suggestion, the idea in my mind to do a probability experiment with flipping a coin. And I took a quarter, 25 cents, and I flipped it 100 times and recorded whether it fell on heads or tails each time. And my very first time that I flipped it, because I had read that the probability should be that you get about 50-50, it was exactly 50 heads and exactly 50 tails the first time I did that coin flipping experiment. And so in the Institute of Noetic Sciences, they have been able to do this with random number generators. So machines that are supposed to spit out either a 1 or a 0 randomly, dispassionately. It's a machine, right? It's supposed to it just chooses whatever it wants, or not once, right? But it just at random. I don't know what the algorithm is that does that. But anyway, basically what the Institute of Noetic Sciences and other researchers have repeated over and over again is they found that people have been able to consciously control whether or not they get more 1s or more 0s. Now think about that. And this is what a lot of computer-based technology works on, are 1s and 0s. And depending on the sequence of these 1s and 0s, you get a program that gives you a certain result, like calculators, right? So calculators run on these 1s and 0s. When you punch in, 7 plus 7, you get 14 because of the algorithm that's programmed into there with 1s and 0s. So now, if we scale that up to a technology for steering a craft to go along with whether you want to go left, right, up, down, to accelerate to a certain speed, to not crash into stuff moving that fast, right? I mean, it's an amazing technology, maybe for it to slow down or to give a different perspective of the occupants who are in the vehicle so they don't crash into things, right? Or maybe it's pre-programmed to stay away from hitting anything. It has a program like that. I don't know, but the interface could very likely be operating off of a system of thought interaction similar to manipulating the 1s and 0s and random number generators, as revealed by the experiments done with the Institute of Noetic Sciences and other organizations and scientists who have done this research. And this thought-based interface of 1s and 0s, computer programming language, would be used to pilot and program vehicles that use electrogravitics based technology, which is based on subquantum kinetics. And then there are some other things, to take a little side note, something called the Koren octopus, or which is a helmet, a device that stimulates the vestibulocochlear nerve, or the eighth cranial nerve pair, which is involved in hearing and equilibrium and balance, and was researched by Michael Persinger of Laurentian University in Canada, who found that when people were exposed to natural phenomena like earthquake lights or ball lightning and different things like that, the electromagnetic frequencies in these naturally occurring electromagnetic phenomena, if a person was caught in a wave of these things or somehow got influenced by these signals, the frequencies given off electromagnetically by these natural phenomena, they would experience different things like angels, or have religious experiences, or demons, or sometimes extraterrestrials, or they were able to somehow see into a different dimension. And Michael Persinger and his colleagues would record these different electromagnetic frequencies and signals from the environment and play back these signals through the helmets that, as I said before, would influence the vestibulocochlear nerve pair, the vestibulocochlear nerve pair, or the eighth cranial nerve pair in the person's brain, and cause them to also have these hyper-religious and other types of experiences. And so there's another example of technology interfacing the other way with the human mind. But that's also important in the idea of why sometimes people are able to see these vehicles, is because these vehicles, when they come into our dimension, our reality, our universe, they are attuning to a frequency that is physical, three-dimensional, that we're able to perceive. So they may either be in another dimension, or they have their frequencies manipulated in such a way where it's invisible to our electromagnetic spectrum, where we're not seeing it. Because the electromagnetic spectrum, if it was a piece of film, and I'm paraphrasing also from a documentary I watched a long time ago called The Elegant Universe, where this physicist, this theoretical physicist Brian Greene hosted it. It was on PBS or something like that. And they said if our electromagnetic spectrum, or the entire electromagnetic spectrum that we know of, was like celluloid film that was used in cameras or in movie cameras, if you were to stretch it from the top of the northernmost part of Washington State all the way down to Southern California, the electromagnetic spectrum, the part of it that we human beings experience as visual, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, the visible light that helps us to see, would only be one frame of that film that spans all those miles, I don't know if that's thousands of miles, from Washington down to California. And so we only see a very small bit of the electromagnetic spectrum, but sometimes when the electromagnetic frequencies around us are manipulated through stress, through diet, through very specific electromagnetic means and interfaces, our channel gets changed. We're able to switch into a specific, just like a radio station, or just like punching in the address to a specific website or tuning into a radio station. But nowadays, just mostly just punching in a website address, a specific website address. So that is another way of the interface, and adding more ideas to the technological considerations, right, for eliminating the alien threat. And I'm just taking some notes and going over some speculations here of how these things might work, so bear with me. And then we have some ideas. So there we have some ideas about the different links between technology and how it interfaces with consciousness and thought. And so I just talked about one way how technology can create hallucinations or tune people in to another aspect of reality that we don't normally see, right? In the same way that if you're not looking at a computer screen right now, or you're not looking at a television screen, you're not listening to the radio, you're not going to be receiving that signal because you don't have your computer turned on. It's the same way that when these certain frequencies interact with our brains, which is also interacting with our mind, because consciousness is not the brain, but then we're able to tune in and have that kind of interface and have that experience of that specific channel that we tune into. So, but those signals are there all the time. You just don't see them because they're invisible to you until you have a receiver, right? Like your internet router that then transmits that signal and puts it on your computer screen, or the radio waves that get translated into an image on your television screen or through the radio. Right? It's the same idea of signals, the same way that we receive signals through our different senses that then get translated into electrochemical signals that are interpreted by our brains, which then we see and hear and taste and smell and touch, right? And we also feel pain and balance and heat, right? So all those different senses. And then you see how things like that relate to how consciously, when we break it down simply to ones and zeros, how it's been demonstrated, or at least I have explained how the Institute of Noetic Sciences has done research on this. So again, look into this for yourself. So here we have it. We have these different types of research that have been done that show that in fact there are interactions between mind and matter and mind. And so all of that is to, again, give validation to this experiment that a lot of us need to be doing in constructing and using the Metatron weapon as I've laid it out in order to defend and attack alien threats. There are in fact mind-matter interfaces that can be demonstrated and shown. Electromagnetism can affect our brain. This is why so many people are in an uproar about 5G and other things like that, right? And people talk about electromagnetic pollution and electromagnetic smog and all these effects, right? Because we know, or a lot of people understand or think that they know, that electromagnetism has an effect on our health and our physical bodies. It's not often something that we see unless we're looking at a light, a light that lights up your room, or a flashlight, or a laser, or your TV screen, or your mobile device, or your computer, right? But that's the electromagnetic experience that we have. But we don't see it flying around all through the air. To use just a general idea, it's all around us, but people have this idea that it's going to affect their health. And I'm simply agreeing with that and taking that further to help understand this hypothesis, this idea of how the technology works with these beings that are invading, interfering with, abducting people on Earth, and how we can use it to fight back. But the thing is that we have to learn to accept it. We have to shift our paradigm. We have to shift our understanding, because if people don't start looking into and realizing that this type of technology using our minds is entirely possible and already exists, then no one's going to do it. And it's going to be left in the hands of elites who control this power, and then the extraterrestrials and the aliens who are using it. We're not going to advance if we don't start thinking in another way. And that brings me to breakaway civilizations. There are, in fact, groups of human beings on Earth already who have technology and vehicles and different types of weapon systems and things like that, that people are witnessing and think they might be aliens or extraterrestrials from other worlds. Humans already have that technology. And what I'm talking about now is helping to put that into the hands of everybody. We need to start experimenting with it also. And it's understandable why perhaps only a few people have this technology in their hands. Because just imagine this. This breakaway civilization, with the technology that they have, they could very well have scalar vibrational weapons that were described by Joseph P. Farrell in his book, The Cosmic War. Interplanetary warfare in ancient texts, or something like that. I don't remember. I also don't have that book. But if some crazy people, some unstable people had their hands on that technology, they could destroy the entire planet. Like, actually blow up the Earth by shaking it, by tuning into the Earth's frequency and vibrating it in such a way that it just blows into pieces. Or the moon, which would be catastrophic in either case. Right? So that's one idea. Maybe that's why a lot of this technology is so secretive. And the other idea, which is very popular amongst many conspiracy theorists, is that if we did have this technology, that if it was made more available to the general public, then those who hold these secrets are also many of the same ones who hold the monopolies on energy distribution to the planet, which makes us slaves basically to fossil fuels. If we had these types of energies, which a lot of people classify under the general heading of free energy, if we had that technology, people wouldn't be paying for electricity and gas and everything like that, and people would be actually freed from being enslaved to having to work their butts off all the time in order just to get a little bit of that energy to run their homes and their vehicles, just to move about and to live, to heat and cool their homes and to travel from one place to the next. So that's another idea. I don't know, but it is pretty scary that if we did have a high technology, that it could actually destroy the planet. It's very much a possibility. And so, which leads now into another idea that perhaps technology has advanced much more quickly than has been able to advance our psychological and spiritual advancement. So much so that we are not ready for that technology, because somebody would use it to hold the world hostage and say, hey, if you don't bow down to me, I'm going to blow up the whole world, because I'd rather rule the world than not. And if I can't rule the world, I'm going to blow it up, because everybody has this technology. But you got to think that there's got to be some kind of dampeners and some kind of fail-safes that would prevent that from happening if that technology were to be released to the world at large. But we can just take a little small piece of that, and we can fight back against the alien threats. Again, going back to the idea of the Metatron weapon that I've described before, that I've constructed and have discussed how to use against alien threats, which is a psychologically thought-based technology. And I gave different examples of research that has been done that shows that there in fact can be, and already there already are thought-based interfaces with technology that is most likely based in electromagnetic systems. So our thoughts interacting with electromagnetically based systems. Well, first, our thoughts interacting with simple binary digital computer systems that then control electrogravitically based technologies and vehicles that then also contain technologies that can influence human biology with different onboard systems, which could be considered weapons or other type of manipulations that maybe the demon aliens are using when they abduct people. How they program screen memories into people and knock people unconscious and make them think that they're having a sleep paralysis episode or not being able to breathe, when really it's a screen for these other horrible things that they're doing. So thought interacts digitally with computer systems that control electromagnetically, electrogravitically based technologies and vehicles, which then on board or handheld or however also can then emit signals, as demonstrated with the Koren octopus and other signals that we find in nature, that can then manipulate people's biology, their brains and their bodies, to have them feeling and thinking and seeing all kinds of different types of things. So the technology, that idea that I just laid out, that's entirely possible. And this comes from a variety of different things that I talked about. I talked about, the Koren octopus, which is also known as the God helmet, and Michael Persinger's research of influencing the 8th cranial nerve pair, right? And then how the Institute of Noetic Sciences has done experiments of thought-based or consciousness interacting with and influencing ones and zeros, digits, and random number generators. And then about James Clerk Maxwell's ether, and then the ether in which the Etherons then form into the physical reality, and how those are the basis of that subquantum kinetics is the basis of electrogravitic systems, which would power and which would basically power these different types of vehicles, and then can work back out the other way to have influences on the mind. So I think I've said enough there. And I also gave, remote viewing and the CE5 Initiative, and I talked about the CE5 also has a protocol and remote viewing, and these are all conscious-based technologies and ideas. And then there's one more thing to consider, which is ontological mathematics, which then also provides a very stable groundwork that explains all of our existence and basically demonstrates that the so-called spirit world and this non-physical ether dimensions of pure consciousness, of thought, are actually one and the same thing. Just like how a lot of New Agers say the universe, whereas religious people would say God. Whereas many people now say demons and other people say gray aliens. Where many people would say angels and other people would say extraterrestrial intelligences. All of these things are one and the same. People are just using different names for the same thing. Some people say magic, other people will say technology. But it's all the same thing. And we have to start understanding it that way to know that we now have these technological considerations for eliminating the alien threat. And there are many other uses for it. I'm just specializing in eliminating alien threats. There's a need for some kind of specialization in this area, and that's what I'm working on developing and doing. It just happens to go right along with all the other work that I do, with me earning a degree in clinical hypnosis and in metaphysical sciences, and doing work with binaural beats and isochronic tones and different sound healing vibrations. And then also, of course, because of the experiences I've had, most importantly, with close encounters with alien beings. So that's it. Now that I was able to brainstorm this out, in the following podcast, the ideas will be a lot more tight and a little bit more understandable, and I'm glad that I was able to slow down and actually I'm excited, but I was able to speak more clearly. Sometimes I get so excited that I'm speaking so fast. I've listened to my other podcasts and I mumble a lot, but I have to leave it out there because that's what I do. I rant online, whether writing my blogs and articles or making videos of all kinds and music and whatever, and it's just, that's it. I'm not going to take it back. It might be real stupid, it might be horrible, as in like taste wise, like people might just think the music sucks or it's really dumb or the production is bad, but that's the journal of my life. I'm just going to keep doing it because I've got, if not good intentions, they're at least neutral. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. Except these, I'm not going to cuss, this one's not going to be an explicit podcast, except those aliens. I want them destroyed. I'm not friends with them. There are a lot of people, man, but that's not going to change my mind about this. I'm using my technology, the Metatron weapon, against alien threats. So, what am I calling this today? What did we just listen to? This is technological considerations for eliminating alien threats. Yes. Technological considerations for eliminating alien threats. That's what this will be, the first one of, and I'll do some follow-ups. But that's it. And if there are going to be some extras on uniquequilibrium.com. This audio that you hear playing in the background is called Downpour Phaser. I recorded the rain and created a binaural beat and isochronic tone production, and you can use this with images that I provide of Metatron's cube in one dimension to focus on building your own Metatron weapon against alien threats. You can also use any geometric shape that you like, sacred geometry. I choose the Metatron or Metatron's cube because Metatron's an angel, aka alien, and so it's basically using their own technology against them. Or if Metatron is a good, bad guy, I don't know, but it's alien technology. And so we're going to use this type of sacred geometry as one of the first bases to build a weapon. No one that I know of, I could be wrong, I've been wrong before, but I don't know of anybody who's combined the sacred geometry in a way with binaural beats and visual imagery to create a metaphysical or psychic weapon to defend and attack alien threats. So that's what I've done. We'll see. Maybe somebody else has. I hope to meet them sometime or share notes with them. But there you go. That's what I'm doing. And yeah, that's it. I mean, I had some other stuff written down about sleep paralysis, but yeah, I'm going to work on tightening up this idea and making it really solid for some more actionable stuff, because I'm really onto something here, especially with because I was really looking for, the idea of like what provides the boundaries and parameters to control the technology. And it was just it just became so apparent to me with the Institute of Noetic Sciences and how they were influencing random number generators, ones and zeros. And that's a perfect consideration, technological consideration for steering and piloting these different crafts or controlling different technology. And then there's another concept about the shared dream that we are in as our reality, and the individual dreams that we have when we go to sleep, which would be another explanation for telepathy and how sometimes telepathy works. We can talk to each other in minds, and how other times the thoughts are cut off. So I'll get into that another time. But yeah, this is it. This is all for now. So technological considerations for eliminating alien threats. That's what that is, buddy.
All right, listeners all around the world, thanks for joining me for another adventure with metaphysical hypnosis and meditation. Your continued support is always welcome. And if you're excited about the great offerings here that help you relax, sleep, lucid dream, learn, and beyond, then support the creation of many more metaphysical hypnosis and meditation productions by becoming a monthly contributor. You can support these adventures with a subscription by going to uniquequilibrium.com and simply clicking on the link that says Uniquequilibrium Supporters, and there you will find links that you can support through Anchor, through PayPal, or through Liberapay. You've been listening to the Uniquequilibrium podcast by Hypno-Athletics, Exercising Your Mind. My name is Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander. I'm your host and guide, and I will catch you on the next wave. Stay well.